high mountain, and maybe we should tell you how high it is. It is 1,900 feet above sea level. It's a very unique geological phenomena, this mountain. It's called horst in English. And horst is when you have, as a result to underground pressure, a mountain pushed up like this. You know, you're in the center of a valley, and all of a sudden you have just the one solo mountain. This is very unique. You don't have that very many places in the world. And one of them happens to be this mountain, Mount Tabor, which is in our Christian, I would say, language, we call it the Mount of Transfiguration. Jesus took the three beloved disciples and went up a high mountain. There is no higher mountain than Mount Tabor in the area where he ministered. You know, Nazareth is only about 5-6 miles away from here, and we drove about 15 miles from Tiberias, Tabor, Nazareth. Cana is 5 miles from here. This is the area of his ministry. So when the Bible says he went up a high mountain, there is no higher mountain than this one. And that's why we're saying this is the Mount of Transfiguration. Of course, the Protestants would say, no, it is Mount Hermon, where I'm going to take you tomorrow when we go up to Caesarea Philippi, and say that is the Mount of Transfiguration. Why do they say so? Simply because this group is going to wait for the sunny spot, and I'm not going to move an inch. I'm mean. But why do the Protestants say that? It's because, you know, Jesus was in Caesarea Philippi, where we're going to go tomorrow, and that's where he addressed the disciples with that question, who do people say that I am? And chronologically speaking, the Transfiguration takes place after that story. But some of the Gospels would say 6 days later. 6 days later to what? To that event in Caesarea Philippi, which means he did have enough time to come back to his territory. Other Gospels would say 8 days later. So we have 6 or 8 days after that event with the disciples up there that he came back here, and maybe, to my best understanding, he was disappointed up there with all the answers that he was getting about who he is. Because notice, he asked the disciples, who do people say that I am? And then they started telling him all kinds of things. And then he put him on the spot, and he said, well, who do you think that I am, now that you've been with me a while? And that's where Peter made the bingo, I call it. All right? Well, to him, I think after that, he said, well, I probably need to do this in a better manner. He took the three beloved disciples, Peter, James, and John. And you know, by the way, every time the Bible says he took Peter, James, and John, you know, before you even continue reading, something is very important is about to take place. And he took them up here, and here he was transfigured before them. And what happened? He was seen with who? Moses and Elijah. I thought Moses never made it to the promised land. Did you ever think about that?
Yes, I did.
He did. He made it. You know, because we always read that he died on the other side of the Jordan. He's buried on Mount Nebo in Jordan of today. That was his punishment. But no, here at the Transfiguration, we see him on Mount Tabor with Jesus and with Elijah. I have no problem with Elijah. You know why? Because he never died. He didn't die, did he?
No.
That's why he's the most important prophet in Judaism. Elijah is the one who will come back and blow the ram's horns in Judaism to announce the coming of the Messiah. Did you ever experience what the Jews call the Seder meal? You know, they leave an extra seat, extra glass of wine at the table, the door open, because they believe that Elijah will come at the Seder meal to announce the coming of the Messiah. So I have no problem with Elijah. You call him Elijah, we call him Saint Elias, by the way. He's a saint, isn't he? Of course, what do you mean probably?
Yes.
Let's go back to the Vatican. He is a saint. What I'm trying to tell you is saints are alive, are they? They are. They're not dead. So when the Catholics pray to saints, others would tell us, why do you pray to dead people? Well, who said that saints are dead? If Moses and Elijah, after thousands of years, are back on Mount Tabor, obviously they're not dead. Are they? Right? I just like to make sure we know what we're doing, because I proceed according to what we agree on. So they came up here. Jesus was talking to them, conversing with them. And what was he talking about? Of course we do. Matthew says he was conversing with Moses and Elijah about his departure. Departure. What's the departure word in the Old Testament? Exodus. Who led the first Exodus? Jesus is doing the second Exodus, folks. Up here on Mount Tabor, he's talking about his departure. Okay. All that happened back in the 1st century AD. Jesus is now crucified. We have a group that followed Jesus called Christians. They continued to be underground, sort of, until when? Until 315. Saint Helen, the mother of Constantine, comes over here looking for where biblical events took place, and she convinced her son, Constantine, who later also converts to Christianity. O'clock. 10 minutes ahead, though. Who later converts to Christianity. And you know, by the way, some people are confused about that. The Roman Empire has become, or the Byzantine Empire, let's call it, has become a Christian empire. So the Romans became Christians. Some people think, we did a replacement of population. No. The same people who were under the Byzantine Empire, who were pagans, Romans, became Christians. That has become the official religion of the Roman Empire at the time. Only then the Christians come from underground and they start practicing the faith openly, but that required building churches. Here, specifically talking about Mount Tabor, the first church was built in 350. A small chapel. But as Christianity prospered in the Holy Land, that small chapel was not big enough. So they built another one, and by the 9th century we had 4 chapels at the same time up here. And that is true in many other places. Not that I would repeat myself, but I will remind you of that again. What happens is, in the 7th century, in 614, we had an incident with a group that came from Iran of today, called the Persians. It's recorded as the Persian invasion to the Holy Land. In that invasion, the Persians tried to deface the Christian presence here. That did not work, of course. Every time they destroyed a church, we waited a while and then we rebuilt the church. Now, here on Mount Tabor, maybe because of the height, they never came up here. That's why The first church that was built in 350 was not destroyed. On the contrary, we added another church. In the 9th century, we had 4 churches. But we always had intruders in this land who tried to deface the Christian presence. And towards the end of the 10th century, beginning of the 11th century, that is when, of course, Islam became more extreme. And the extremism of Islam required a contradicting force that came from the West. You know who I'm talking about? The Crusaders. All right? When our holy places, when our Christian folks were being endangered by the extreme Islam that was rising at the time, the European countries, let's call them England, France, Italy, Spain, and Germany. Those are the 5 countries. So when you see the Jerusalem cross, which is the big cross and 4 tau crosses, have you seen that before? If you haven't, I'll show you that. Yeah, I'll show you that in many places. That represents actually, that's called the Crusader cross, where the big cross is England, Italy, France, Spain, and Germany. Those are the 5 countries who participated in the Crusades to the Holy Land. And they came here in 1099 and they took over the Holy Land and, so to speak, in inverted commas, saved Christianity. I'm saying that because they themselves became corrupted after that. And less than 100 years after this, they were defeated by the Muslim force that came from the east. The guy well known as Saladin, you call him. His name is Saladin, actually.